We live in an era where outrage is cruelty and currency, and this is often mistaken for charisma. And into this digital gladiatorial pit steps Alex Bellfield, the man who once graced the airwaves of BBC radio leads, only to descend into a career of venomous monologue, YouTube defamation, and eventually criminal stalking. Belfield is part of a troubling modern archetype, the gifted but ungoverned media provocateur. A class of men, and it is overwhelmingly men, who convince themselves that being offensive is not just a right but a moral obligation. Tommy Robinson is another. And these figures surround themselves with grievance, reject accountability, and, in the process, leave real people, real victims, in psychological tatters. So, to be really honest, and yes, we should be cautious, Alex Bellfield was convicted in 2022 for a vicious and continued campaign of abuse against 4 individuals, including the BBC presenters Jeremy Vine and Bernie Keith, the videographer Ben Hewis, and the theatre blogger Philip Dehaney. The verdict, 5.5 years in prison, half to be served inside, half unlicensed. But what does stalking mean in this context? Not the furtive alleyway lurking or shadowy trench coats. Belfield's method was digital. It was a relentless rain of social media content, tweets, YouTube videos, emails, a sewer pipe of bile. And Jeremy Vine described it as like swimming in sewage. And for once, one must admit, Vine was rather underselling it. You might imagine that such a sentence would humble a man, but you would be wrong. Upon his release on license, Belfield allegedly launched into a bizarre flurry of publicity promoting his autobiography, His Own Worst Enema, announcing a summer speaking tour and uploading videos claiming he's a political prisoner, all the while portraying himself as some kind of tragicomic free speech martyr. At one point, his website featured the headline, "Thank you for stalking alexbellfield.com." He referred to himself as a convicted talker. At another, he promised a pantomime in 2026 entitled Jack and the Beanstalker. It would be hilarious, and his wit is astonishing. His technique, his imagination is stupendous. And it would be great if the consequences of this humour weren't so horrifying. The damage he has caused, the shattered lives, the mental health ruins, and I've talked to some of the people. We shouldn't forget the actual human cost. Liz Green, one of the women subjected to Belfield's abuse, though he was acquitted of stalking her, says the ordeal left her suicidal, her hair fell out, and she remains on medication. She lives a very rigid, protected life because of the psychological toll. Philip Dehaney, still locked in a civil case with Belfield, said simply, "I just want to move on." He's been waiting years for that chance. And Jeremy Vine, he received compensation in a libel case and described the experience as absolutely Olympic-level stalking. Hardly a term he coined lightly. Belfield's story mirrors that of Tommy Robinson, a similarly tragicomic figure who recasts every self-inflicted downfall as martyrdom. Whether it's the courtroom or the comments section, these men operate in a moral vacuum where the only crime is to be disliked. But their victims are real. Their abuses are deliberate. Their audiences, gleefully radicalized, become accessories. Robinson's legacy trails broken families, damaged reputations. Belfield's trails restraining orders and therapy bills. Both of them, like snails, leaving behind the sluggish residue of their personality. Yet both of them claim persecution, dark forces, shadowy conspiracies. Everyone else is lying. They are the only truth tellers, the self-declared voices of reason, drunk on their own narcissism. One viewer asked me, in the comments section, why I try not to pick sides, why I speak in moral lessons, not political slogans, why I'm not tribal. And the answer is simple. I care about character, and it's disappointing, infuriating to watch intelligent, articulate individuals like Belfield and Robinson waste their considerable talents in the service of spite. This is not fence sitting. This is a sort of statement born out of disappointment. Belfield could have been a satirist, a broadcaster, a genuine voice. Instead, he chose to weaponize the microphone to make misery a brand, to become, in the voice of Jeremy Vine, the Jimmy Savile of trolling. I don't see that that's a moniker to be proud of. So what now? One victim is seeking damages, another is trying to rebuild her life. Belfield is still threatening comebacks and scribbling 6 books, because of course he is. His website is cleaned up for now, his tour postponed, his comeback inevitable. As indeed is the case which comes before the course very shortly. But our job is not to await his next punchline, it's to remember the trail of despair that he's left behind. These men, Robinson, Belfield, and there are others, thrive because we forget, because there's so much of this stuff pouring out of the internet that we just move on to the next misery. These people succeed because we laugh. They return because we refuse to look at the lives that they've broken. And yes, of course, they expose things which are in need of fixing. The Tommy Robinson situation exposed a railway station in the centre of London which is devoid of security. It doesn't matter how many cameras you have. It's a dangerous place. Somebody can end up on the floor next to a pool of blood, unconscious. Tommy Robinson himself can feel threatened and have no one to turn to. Jeremy Vine can feel stalked and have no one to turn to. Philip Dehaney can feel stalked and have no one to turn to. We live in a world where there is lots of surveillance and no security. And these people, these individuals who have turned thuggery into an art form, are filling that void. And that is the issue, and that's why I think these stories are so important. And other people in the comments say, oh, you're obsessed with Tommy Robinson. I'm not obsessed. What obsesses me is to see somebody who has such potential brought so low. What obsesses me is to hear people say, oh, he's a nice fellow. He's very kind. He's very courteous. And then I see the stories of alleged punches. Courtesy. I hear stories about how clever, how brilliant. I can see how clever, how brilliant is Alex Bellfield. And yet I meet his victims. I talk to people who have been victimized by him. I have my own run-in with Belfield. I know how caustic and how vicious he can be. Spinning on a dime, from charm to nastiness. If you flirt with evil, you end up parading evil, but you spread evil around like butter. So we shouldn't be fooled by the pantomime. Alex Bellfield is not a joke, and what he has done is not satire, it's malice on demand. And if that's the voice of reason, then God help us all.